Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Jamie Lee returns to the show. Jamie discusses his first-hand account of the odd circumstances surrounding Hurricane Harvey, and also the recent California fires, with a question of whether energy weapons were used to ignite the fires. And so, without further ado, here's the show with Jamie Lee. Welcome back to the show, Jamie. You've been a very busy guy. You spent some time down in Texas reporting back on Hurricane Harvey, and also you've done some extensive work covering the California fires and whether we were experiencing directed energy weapons. But before we get to Harvey and the fires in California, I was wondering if you would like to talk to us a little bit about the issues that you've been having with YouTube. There is certainly a lot of censoring going on with YouTube and Google, and you have been the target, along with many other truth channels, of that censorship. So I was wondering if you can cover that a little bit before we get into Harvey and the fires in California.
Sure, Mike, and thanks again for having me on your show again. You've got one of the best interview programs anywhere in the world, and it's just high quality, and I really appreciate all your work. And also last show, we were going to dedicate to our friend Bruce, and I'd like to dedicate this show to Bruce Hillier, who had moderngnostic.com and geognostic.com. We miss him. He's very missed in this world. Yeah, the YouTube has just been a continual, slow drip of just this continuing, community strikes, community guideline strikes. If you have no idea what's going to get striked, I had community guideline strikes from something I posted a year ago, 6 months ago, and then I got, copyright strikes. So my plain truth, APLANE truth.info site, I had to remove almost all my videos because I don't know what was going to be the next strike that would take me down, and over 210 posts that I've done since March of 2015 would be gone forever. So I shut that down, and I opened a new YouTube with a PLAIN, a plain truth, and I'm posting on that on things to see if they're going to get struck or not. But it's just this continual logarithms they use to just come after those that are trying to get the truth out. And it started a big time. I noticed it much greater with my 2 strikes got with posting anything about the Las Vegas fake shootings. And that got a lot of people in trouble. And it's just, I don't know, it's just happening to everybody. So I don't feel isolated, but it's just this continual crackdown, and you have no idea how to, what's going to get struck down and what's not. So I guess we maybe have a short time left, but I'm trying to preserve as much as I can.
Were you able to detect any patterns with regard to what they were giving you strikes for?
No. And Richie from Boston, he got taken down, and he said it was because he had a post on that was just him talking about the moon. And so he just came out the other day and got reinstated because he had a lawyer, he said, hired, and they put back up his videos because he was just talking. There's no rhyme or reason. They make you do this little copyright strike questionnaire, 4 questions that you have to answer about guidelines, but it's so vague it can pertain to anything. So it's just what they decide to do. And then also I just noticed in the news where YouTube was starting to censor YouTubes that had children's unfit children's material, and they're striking down some of those people as well. So it is an organized effort. It is a member of Google, and it's just part of the crackdown. And I don't see it getting better at all.
Yeah, Google has been, they have been hitting my blog. When I say hitting it, folks, what I mean is they are restricting the blog's access and viewership in Europe. So I can take a look at the analytics and I can see where the blog is being viewed. So, Jamie, what they've done to me is they have taken out anywhere between 500 to 700 views a day.
Wow.
On my blog. And it's all out of Europe. And I know it's because they don't like some of the material that has to do with revisionist history, with World War II, Zionism, and so on. And so it's this real quiet, subtle way. There's no way for me to prove that they're doing this. But when you look at the analytics, it's very clear what they're doing. So it's balls to the wall. I mean, they're going out and they're trying to take the whole thing down. There's no question about it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you brought up Europe. That's happening to me too on the YouTubes. I get many comments when I post. It says good in all countries, but then people in Europe and Canada say they can't see it. And they're backing off my subscriberships. I had over 66,000 subscribers. And then the other day I went back and I had 65,000 subscribers, and people all the time and saying they've been unsubscribed once, twice, 3, 4 times. So it's the game they're playing. And, I just look at it as we've been blessed to be able to do this as long as we have. I'm really surprised we've been able to, but with all the world events and a lot of the stuff we're going to cover tonight, it's no wonder they're cracking down. The world's getting just more, the chaos, order out of chaos. A game they're playing is just getting self-evident to everybody now. And that's the good news, is that people are waking up. People are really starting to, especially in Northern California, man, there's so many people now that are just like so open to these conversations and so open to having discussions about things like geoengineering and being attacked by our own government and things like that. Whereas before the fires, before all this happened, there wasn't anybody that was willing to talk about it. So, it's a blessing, it's a curse kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Now, did you want to talk about Hurricane Harvey and what took place in Texas? Did you want to go there now, or did you have something else you wanted to cover first?
No, let's start there, because I just, from my blogs and stuff, I started reporting on how the geoengineering was used with not just land-based weather modifications, but also ocean-based. And also I provided some documents in my YouTubes about hurricanes being steered by lasers from up in the sky from space platforms. And then I discovered that use solar panels, collective solar panels, to have sun-guided laser RF frequencies that heat up the solar panels into the collectives that you see down in Fresno and the Central Valleys. And they're going to be we're going to have a one world space energy from space. And all the disasters from Irma and Puerto Rico and Hurricane Harvey, the first headlines were always about people losing power. And same thing happened in California. And I provided the patents for all this as well. There's a company in Manhattan Beach, Solarin Corp, that was founded in 2008. And they've stated that's their goal and that's their plan. And they have all the local and state utility companies signed up for this, and they were supposed to have it in action by 2016, and now they're saying by 2020, and that's just a whole nother can of worms. So when I was learning about that and seeing how it took 9 days for the Hurricane Harvey to be forecast, and then it came in, and then all of a sudden it hit, and I looked and I didn't see any Red Cross there and any FEMA of any of the videos or anything, and people crying out for help. And then I was seeing that Red Cross took in over $425 million, and not one person had seen it. I decided to get on a plane. And also the other thing that I got on a plane from California to Houston was there was a gentleman I call Ozark Matt, who was one of the citizen patrols who went there to rescue people from not the hurricane, but the flooding, which I'll get into. And he was saying there was bodies that were washed out, that dams were purposely opened to flood people into the ocean, bodies riddled with bullets. I mean, it's not fun stuff to talk about, but I had to go to find out for myself. So this was about 3 weeks after the hurricane, and I flew there, and I went down to Houston, and I went to 3 different areas that had been massively flooded out, and I talked to maybe 40 to 50 people. And again, not one person had seen the Red Cross 3 weeks after the event. They were left on their own. FEMA had not been around at all. And to a person, Mike, they said that it was not like any hurricane they'd ever seen. They all said that they didn't leave because it was a category 4 until the day before the hurricane hit. And then they downgraded it to a tropical storm. And these people live in the South. They've had hurricanes they've survived in. So nobody left. And they interviewing the people was just amazing, their stories, because 3 weeks afterwards, people were on their own and they were wanting to tell their story. And I sat there and I listened to story after story of people telling me their story, and they're so glad they could talk to somebody, and no one's helping us. And we're living 3 hours away in a hotel, and we have to drive every day and clean up our homes from all the mildew. Their homes have been gutted down to past the sheetrock to the studs, and the carpeting and the beds are all out in the streets and suburbs after suburbs. And they all said that the rains came in the middle of the night, just like the fires in Santa Rosa and Sonoma, came at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they said it was just flooding. They said there was no wind. It just flooded. And they had 50 inches of rain in 3 hours. And I actually snuck into a FEMA camp in Houston and interviewed some people there. And one gentleman, who I can't get a hold of anymore, I don't know what happened to him, but he was talking about having to go out in the middle of the night with water up to his chest and having snakes in the water. And if you can imagine, in pitch black. And then I found another wonderful lady, Erica Block, who we've been sending supplies to, dehumidifiers, blankets, clothing. We did a GoFundMe, and that's another scam, GoFundMe. They take 8% of everything that's donated, and then it took me a month to get my money from them. $8,000 was raised, and I spent the money, but to get it out of GoFundMe took forever.
They took 8%?
8%. and try and find a corporation to GoFundMe. I tried to find who they were. They're out of San Diego somewhere, but you can't get a hold of them. It's crazy. And they're making, it's disaster capitalism, which we'll get into more. So the people were left on their own, and it was amazing though on the community effort. It was really heart lifting when people were telling me about, it's very racial down there, how the racial boundaries were completely gone. Blacks were helping whites, Hispanics were helping whites, people that were formerly prejudiced were not prejudiced anymore. They saw the kindness in the hearts of people, and it was really neat to see the positive aspects. And Erica was telling me the story about how she was up to her chest in the middle of her street. She thought it was her street. She didn't know because she couldn't see it. And when dawn came, all these citizen patrol boats showed up and started rescuing people off roofs and everything. And people had to hack their ways out of the roofs because the floods came in and lifted beds up to the ceilings, and they had no other option. And all of a sudden, all these shrimp boats and flat boats that came in and started rescuing people. And then they brought them back because the flood, the hurricane or flood had subsided. So they go back to their homes, and the next day, and this happened in 3 different counties, the dams opened all the floodgates. They opened all the floodgates because they said they had to relieve water pressure, and people were flooded out again for 3 days. And that, to a person, they said, caused the damage in Hurricane Harvey. It's not being reported anywhere. And then all of a sudden, Hurricane Harvey was out of the news. Irma comes in, and you haven't heard another word about Hurricane Harvey. Yet there were tens of thousands of people that are still out of homes where they can't rebuild. And the only thing they can do from FEMA is get a $200,000 loan at 3%. To rebuild their homes, which isn't nearly enough. So they take out the loans, they try and rebuild, they can't do it. FEMA acquires the homes. And then all the disaster capitalists, you saw signs after signs, we'll buy your home, we'll remodel your home. And the people were just, I was starting to see the post-traumatic stress syndrome starting to occur there. So then I went back home to Santa Rosa, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, the middle of the night on Sunday, October 8th, a normal day, 89 degrees, summer day. The chemtrail spraying was light. I keep a little chemtrail bar. It wasn't anything great. Normal temperature. We'd had record heat that summer. We've had the greatest rain and snow this past year. And then we had the greatest drought in the history of California in the past 5 years. So it's been pretty crazy. And then all of a sudden on October 8th, about 10 o'clock at night, I start to hear the wind start to swirl. And I've got big redwood trees outside my house. And for those things to move, it takes some wind. And I kind of walked outside, and I looked up, and I saw these blue flashes of light. And I go, oh, my gosh, they're doing stuff. And I thought it was just geoengineering stuff. Well, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I get a pounding on my door, and it's my neighbor telling me there's a fire, not just north of us, but also south of us, and everybody's bugging out, and they've called for evacuations of our area. And I could see an orange in the distance miles away. I said, that's not very close. What's the big deal? But there's cars everywhere. So I said, I'm going to go in my car and drive around. And I started driving around, and there's gas stations are closed, but there's cars 20, 30 deep waiting to get gas. And that happened at gas station after gas station. So I went back and told my neighbors I'm bugging out to the coast, to the West Coast, because the fires came in from the east and the north and the south. And so I started driving, and I only had a quarter tank and got out to the coast. And there was hundreds of people out there too. And I tried to figure out what to do, go south, go north. What should I do? Can't go back. And, it's about, 5:30, 6 in the morning, and sunlight's starting to come up, and there's this red sun. It's just like I'd never seen before. And the fires had started so quickly. Michael, there was over 60 fires that started in over 10 counties. They don't talk about this. 66 fires, one accounting for it is. And so these fires began of here, there, no rhyme or reason. Still to this day, still now over a month and a half later, 2 months later, not one official explanation of why or how these fires started. Not one. We'll get into more a little bit about that. But so anyway, so I'm out on the coast and there's a van pulled up next to me with about 10 guys in it. One guy gets out and they say, oh, he's an Olympic medalist from the Sochi games. He was a freestyle wrestler. And they had told the story that they were staying at the Silverado Hotel in Napa. They had the golf tournament there with Phil Mickelson that weekend, and the power went off before the fire started. And this, we hear time and time again, the power went off before the fire started. And so these people had to break the windows of their second floors and jump out the windows because all the door locks didn't work in the rooms. And they said what they did was the hotel management took those little lighted sticks, you break them and they go fluorescent, and they threw them down the hall so people could see their way out. And this didn't happen to Silverado. This happened at several different places as well. And I went, well, that's amazing.
Was that an EMP?
Yeah, it has to be. There's only no other reason for it, but I didn't know that at the time. I just was bugging out, like I didn't know what was going on, and I wanted to make sure my son was safe. He was with his mom, and I saw her out on the coast, and so then I went down to Marin County, and the fires were not reaching quite as far. So I went and got a bunch of 5-gallon gas cans because on the road out through Sebastopol out 12 out to the coast, there were cars being abandoned and people just walking. It looked like a refugee camp. So I went back and gave gas to a bunch of people. And then the next day, I had just bought a video camera and a drone when I was in Houston to do some filming. And I took the video camera up to this one area and I turned a corner from just a suburb in North Santa Rosa and everything's fine. I'm going, wow, nothing's burned here. Well, what happened? And all of a sudden I turn this corner and there's just devastation. I mean, like I've never seen it before. It was, are you seeing the pictures of it where these homes are just left to the fire chimney and everything's gone, Mike? I mean, there's no bathtubs made of iron. There's no granite countertops. There's no glass. There's these cars that are melted, just singed there's no rubber on the steel belted rims. I mean, this place, the first thing I thought was this place was torched. Something torched this place because there's still vegetation. There's still, flax plants and other plants that were standing there right next to these homes that were torched. And then there'd be 6 homes, 8 homes torched. And then the next home wouldn't be. And then there'd be 4 homes torched and the next home wouldn't be. I mean, it was the dividing line. There's a school right up north of there called Cardinal Newman. And there's a picture showing a straight line going through the ball field that's going about 50 yards. And it's perfectly straight. One half is black and the other half is green with a ball field. And we saw so many anomalies like this. It was just incredible. So then I happened to do a post about a similar type of event that happened last year in Alberta, Canada, with the Fort Murray fires. Have you heard about those?
A little bit.
Well, they called them the Beast Fire because it started for one day and they thought it had it contained, and all of a sudden 2 months later they finally get it contained. But Fort Murray is where they have all the fracking companies and whatnot. And what happened to all the gas and oil companies, right? The fracking went down as gas prices dropped and everything, and switching over to battery cars. Well, what's Houston known for? Refineries, right?
Right.
So we're switching over to battery cars and we're switching over to Uber auto drive. You don't drive your car anymore. So I'm thinking they did this to get, the fracking and get the refineries and get their insurance money out of this stuff as one part of the whole equation. So I saw this lady in Truth by Grace, I forget her name, and another lady up in who did a wonderful piece on the Fort Murray Beast fires. And she was the one that alerted me to these types of fires that were unheard of, where they melted the glass, the steel belted radials. One house was touched, another house. And I remember that. And I went back and reviewed the fires and I said, whoa, that's the exact same that just happened here. So then I went to other areas, and one area is fine, another area is torched, another area is fine. So then I start posting. And one of the things I really, really love about the work we do is, and you probably feel the same way, is the commentary. People are informing me. They're adding to it. So I started to get this comments from this lady who sent me a PDF, and it was the Santa Rosa Planning and Zoning from June 2017, showing almost the exact same area footprints for redevelopment. That they're going to be Agenda 21, no fireplaces, green design. And I'm going, holy cow. And then my friend and I went and we toured the areas and went and looked a little deeper. And And it was amazing to see that some areas, it was specific. It was, some people are calling it the most selective fire in history, because this area is touched, that area is fine. This area is touched, that area is fine. And then I go on to read further documents that on October 7th, 2 days before the fires, the Santa Rosa Planning Commission was considering raising the density of the areas to over 100%, doubling the capacity of home capacities, which is exactly what Agenda 21 is. The agenda for the 21st century is to build smaller homes, smaller footprints, and have a walking and biking community. And so it just kept growing from there. And then we learned that the city council was starting to say, well, maybe we shouldn't rebuild in some of these areas. One area, Fountain Grove. And then my friend sent me another article talking about how many avionic laser companies there are in Santa Rosa. And I identified 4 different laser companies, including Hewlett-Packard Agilent, which is now called, I think, Precision Technologies. They're in Fountain Grove, where the area got hit the most, and they weren't touched. None of the laser companies were touched, but they make the avionic softwares for laser guidance systems. What a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And it goes on from there.
I did watch the video where the fires mapped to the Agenda 21 layout. You know, one of the things that I was thinking is, in order for them to implement Agenda 21, people are just not going to pick up and leave their homes. They're going to have to force them out. As I was watching the fires, and then I watched that video, in fact, I think you had posted it on your channel. I put it on the blog. I was thinking to myself, I think this is what they're doing. What they're doing is, this is their way with these fires, very precision-like, targeting specific homes, communities, and areas to get them out, so that they can implement their Agenda 21 agenda.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at the biodiversity maps, you see how, and for people that aren't aware of the Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 and all these plans, it was started in Rio and Summit in 1991, I believe, with Al Gore. But it's all about getting people out of the rurals and out of the suburbs into the cities. And back about 5 years ago, when I started to get into the whole Agenda 21 and ICLEI, by a lady who lives in Santa Rosa, Rosa Quay, who wrote a great book that everybody must read, Behind the Green Mask of Agenda 21. It all was about what was going on in Santa Rosa. And another wonderful activist lady, Deborah Tavares, who lives here as well, was talking about how fires were going to be used to burn down Northern California for the Agenda 21. So I've met with Deborah Tavares now, and we've gotten together and we're starting to do some stuff. And yeah, these people have been talking about this for a long time. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then now it's here. And it's not only here, Mike, but this has been happening as I started to do research. People said, well, you got to look at, besides the Beast Fire in Canada, look at Chile. They had a major fire last year, the biggest fire in history. I mean, this fire in California was the greatest fire in the history of California ever by far. And I'll read to you a little later the firemen's comments that they've never seen anything like this before. In fact, I interviewed a fire captain for 20 years, John Lord, and he agreed with the assessment I was doing about the lasers and being an EMP event, that was the only plausible explanation he could find. And he took great risk to post that, but he didn't care. He wanted the truth to get out. And other firemen have told me the same thing, but they didn't want to go on record because they have pensions. But it hit China. It hit Portugal, Madeira, Portugal in 2016. It hit Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It hit where are the other areas? I'll look at the other areas a little bit. But it wasn't just Santa Rosa, but it had the exact same telltale signs where cars were literally torched, but the trees next to them were fine. The same exact type of signatures. And it's the same exact type of signature that Judy Woods, in her book about what happened to the World Trade Center towers and the dustification of the World Trade Centers, she chronicled very well how the cars were turned to torched even half mile away from the World Trade Centers, where they're completely torched. Parking lot of cars completely torched, just like what happened in China. So yeah, this is one of their new energy weapons, and it's all part of their Agenda 21. And then we'll get in a little bit, but the Press Democrat, our local newspaper here, is owned by some real shady characters, the Sonoma Media Investment Group. And so they started planting stories in the local newspaper here as after the fires happened. And I want to read this one letter to the editor. And it says, editor, it was shocking to see the old neighborhood of Coffey Park decimated by the firestorm. Yet Coffey Park was also victim to the 1970s dead worm urban design, a dead-end cul-de-sac mazes designed for cars, not people, where a half-mile walk requires 2 miles of detours and takes 15 minutes to drive 3 miles for milk. Coffey Park has a unique opportunity to rebuild into a mixed-use, viable neighborhood. Let's face it, millennials don't want to end up in suburbia, and boomers want out. People desire to walk or pedal to jobs, schools, shops, common services, and restaurants without burning gas or reaching dangerous speedways such as Hopper Lane. Innovative people-based designs enjoy higher demand, real estate value, and resident enjoyment. Rebuilding can blend the best of what people want while doing what Americans love to do. The city of Santa Rosa can help residents of Coffey Park rise from the ashes and rebuild a truly walkable neighborhood where services are available, streets are walkable, and people gather in pleasant, common spaces. Let's get to work rebuilding Coffey Park and lead in rebuilding America. Well, all of a sudden that comes out, and then a document comes out like 3 days later, front pages that says this Coffey Park Fountain Grove fires was in the exact same footprint as they called the Haney fire from back in 1964. So then the conversation becomes, why should we rebuild if it's in a fire disaster zone and it keeps happening? Maybe we shouldn't even rebuild, Shirley Zane of the Santa Rosa Board of Governors said.
Yeah. I was thinking, well, I mean, what's the probability, the odds of it happening in the same place twice like that? That's just... Wow.
So they're using that as an excuse, like you said. Well, how are they going to get the people out? Well, now it's happening. And this is the quote, actually. It was Susan Gorin, supervisor. She goes, quote, I hesitate to even suggest this, but many people are starting to say, why are we, and this is in the city's realm, why are we thinking about permitting the rebuilding of Fountain Grove?
It's unbelievable, Jamie.
I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I mean, it hit middle class, it hit upper class, and then all of a sudden, within days, this Darius Anderson and Doug Bosco, who run the Sonoma Media Investment Group, who own the Press Democrat, Kenwood Investments, real estate deals, they appointed the Press Democrat, the guy that owns the Press Democrat, appointed the former head of FEMA, a guy named James Lee Witt, who used to play Little League with Bill Clinton. And Clinton appointed him FEMA director, and now he runs all these different organizations and is helping with Darius Anderson and Doug Bosco in the Rebuild North Bay organization, along with our local bank called the Redwood Community Bank. And so they're taking in all this money. They're saying they're going to rebuild. Well, why is a newspaper owner appointing a former FEMA disaster capitalist to run the show? Who gave him the power to do that? Why does he have the power to do that? Well, then it turns out the guy belongs to a disaster capital management firm. He used to own, it was Witt O'Brien Enterprises that sold to Secor Holdings, and Secor Holdings reported a third quarter profit of $15.1 million, mostly from Inland River Services and Witt O'Brien. Disaster capitalists.
Yeah.
So he comes in, he's appointed by some schmuck, and then he comes in and he's also founded a corporation called EB5 Global Management LLC, with law offices in Washington, D.C., Little Rock, and registered in Delaware. According to EB Global Management, it's to form, fund, and manage special purpose limited partnerships to loan money to companies creating jobs in the United States that align with capital requirements of developers and entrepreneurs with immigration goals of our EB5 investors. Well, the EB5 is a program that allows visas. If you pay $500,000, you're allowed to bring in people out of the country to reside. They get full visas here in the country. You can buy your way in, and you can bring in, I think it's 10 people per $500,000 donated. And so Dianne Feinstein tried to stop it. Oh, here it is. EB5 visas are granted to foreigners who make investments of at least $500,000 in areas with high unemployment or at least $1 million everywhere else. And they guarantee full visas to 10 people. Since its inception, the EB program has been used to finance hotels, retail space, housing projects. So here we are with people that have lost all their livelihoods, their homes, they're out of everything, and they're bringing in foreigners, and we don't even have housing for them. I mean, we've doubled the amount of homeless now in Santa Rosa. It was already a really bad problem, and now these people are just everywhere. And so all of a sudden they're under the highways under 101, and there's nobody helping them. So we started bringing them food, and we asked what they want. We went, it got cold, so we brought them hand warmers, and then came back the next day, and the police had come and cleared them all out under 3 overpasses, just gone. And then they had to move down the road to some other place. And it's just this tight squeezing. And then all of a sudden the community has more crime. It has more homeless. People start crying for more of a police state, right? See where this is leading?
Yeah, and you have all these local political clowns and law enforcement, whether most of them are probably just useful idiots. There's no compassion. There's no empathy. It's just wicked and evil. They have no interest in helping anybody.
No, it's disaster capitalism. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for 25 years, and I started to see the beginnings of that. And that's why I got out of the business, because it's capitalist capitalizing. And there's basically 3 or 4 companies left in the world, and they're named Google, Facebook, Amazon, and
that's it.
That's it. I mean, they're acquiring everything and everybody, and there's no, but people are waking up now, and we've had like 2 or 3 meetings and one thing I really want to mention, I saw the same thing here in Santa Rosa. The community is rising up. People are putting out tables. Here, take this. When the fires hit, everybody donated clothes. It was ridiculous how many clothes people dropped off at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds and everywhere else, just to the point where they said, please don't donate any more clothes. And I started thinking about it, and I go, we're such a consuming society that we don't even know how to give. And now it's a month and a half later, and people are making meals for people, and people are providing temporary shelters for people, and there's post-traumatic stress syndrome. Mental health facilities are being overwhelmed because now the hard work has started, where people are understanding they're never going back to their homes. I mean, what's happening now is they're started this thing called Rebuild North Bay with these guys, Darius Anderson and Doug Bosco, and the Army Corps of Engineers under DeWitt, the former FEMA guy, has come in along with the EPA, and because they're saying all the land is so toxic, they are force arming. They're forcing these people who've lost everything to sign what's called ROE agreements, the Stafford Act from FEMA. In order to rebuild, they have to give over their insurance, Mike. They sign over their life, the insurance to FEMA, and FEMA's coming in now, and all but about 80 people out of over 4,000 or 5,000 were force armed. They had all these community meetings where they had it was a total Delphi technique. It was a total part of this whole thing to get these people, because they had no other choice, to sign over, or they were going to be forced with an abatement procedures, which they're carrying out now. For those that didn't sign up, the county's going to come and clear their properties of 6 inches of toxicity of hazmat and bill them at full rate. And these people are never getting back into their homes. There's no value. I mean, the home prices have dropped by 50% in these areas. So the money's not there. And so I was in a restaurant, and there was some executives from out of state, from a couple insurance companies, and they were talking about how they were going to tell their clients that there's not enough money left after the debris removal, and they had to give it to the FEMA for them to rebuild. And they were talking different terms on how to use it. And I walked out of there, and right before I left, I just laid into them. I said, you guys have no soul. These people have lost everything. You have no idea what is happening here. And for you to talk in that language, and they didn't know anybody was listening to them. I wish I had a recorder on that. But this is the disaster capitalism. Another one is Redwood Credit Union. They've taken in over $25 million of donated money to help people, yet not one person here has seen any money. Not one person has gotten money from Redwood Credit Union, but they can get loans at 1.5% of up to $180,000 from the bank if they want.
I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this, and I'm just shaking my head. I mean, there's no humanity in these people.
Well, it's time for us to rise up and wake up. And so a lot of the conversations now are talking about self-empowerment, about being the author of our own authority. And there's many, many examples of people doing a business that doesn't include monetary systems, a donation system, free give, people free giving. There's no taxes involved. Here, I give to you, you give to me. What the heck does the government have involved? And people are realizing they have no faith in the government. It's been gone. And so there's this wonderful opportunity. I mean, the Chinese character for crisis is the same one for opportunity for us to come together and start creating the world we want to see. Because if we don't, my son and the rest of the children have no chance, because this is going to continue. But let me give you a little idea who these players are so you understand how really bad it is. This guy, Darius Anderson, has a long history. He's the owner of the Press Democrat, as a high-powered lobbyist for companies like, drumroll please, Pacific Gas and Electric. Now, Pacific Gas and Electric is being blamed. They're saying that the phone utilities were what caused the fires to heat up to 2,000 degrees in an instant and torch cars and flip them on their roofs and burn homes down to their chimney and nothing left. But he's a lobbyist for PG&E and also Station Casinos, Pfizer, Microsoft. He worked for Clint Eastwood, was fundraiser for the former governor of California, Gray Davis. But he was also fined $500,000 in a corruption probe. And now he wants to build a $30 million boutique hotel off the Sonoma Plaza. And another partner of his, Doug Bosco, is another owner of the Press Democrat. And he's got ties to the savings and loan scandal, which happened with that guy, I forget his name, down in Arizona. And he was a former congressman and was implicated in a check bouncing scandal. And he's a behind-the-scenes power broker with deeper interest in gravel mining, timber, and development. Well, we just went through 12 years of putting in a smart train, quote unquote, that has about riders of 40 people that cost tens of millions of dollars. That was 8 years. But it's interesting. They put in heavy-duty industrial railroad ties because they're going up north into the Eel River and up there because they want to do mining operations. And this guy was on the board of the smart trains. And his team is called the Bosco Boys. But he's also part owner of the Sonoma Media Investments, including the Press Democrat and the Northern Pacific Railroad Company. He's involved with local and national government. He was a California state legislature, a congressman from 82 to 90, and he's chairman of the California Coastal Conservancy and board of directors of the First Community Bank. And then this guy, Robert Steele, president of the board of directors of the Redwood Credit Union here since 1999. He works for a company called Alliance Global Corporate and Specialty in Petaluma, California, which is right next door, who are disaster recovery underwriters.
Wow.
You can't make this stuff up. And then there's this character called Bill Gallagher, who's a Santa Rosa developer and founder of First Community Bank, now called Poppy Bank, as well as Blue Gate Bank that set up donations. And this guy had a bunch of interest right where the fires hit. He was trying to get this sweetheart deal to get property in Fountain Grove. And now he's going to get it for pennies on the dollar because the values have just dropped dramatically. And he's just also a member of the First Community Bank. And, you know, it goes on and on. So it's using the force of government to force its citizens to pay. Oh, here's another one. The Poppy Bank has also helped fund the Sonoma, the SCP, which is Sonoma Community Power. So Sonoma Community Power, they installed a couple years ago, which is supposed to be a choice between getting off of PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric utilities, and going to cleaner power. Well, it turns out these guys all own it, and electricity will continue to be delivered over PG&E's distribution systems. And the way they say they're cleaner is because they only count their renewable energy as 33%, and PGE statewide is 19%. So they're saying they're renewable. I mean, it's just all a scam everywhere you look. You know, even including the planning and zoning that was done in June of 2017, and then the Stackham and Packham density redevelopment of properties were doubling the amount of making double the amount of occupancy per lot, which you're starting to see now with everybody talking about building smaller homes. It's amazing, Mike, to see it just happening right in my neighborhood.
All these towns are knee deep in Agenda 21, Jamie. My town here, I live in a small town in North Carolina. The planning department, they're all in bed with the Agenda 21 and the United Nations protocols. And the thing is, they don't know that they are. The local planning departments and so on, folks, they don't know. They're people that get up every day, they go to work, and they have no clue what it is that they are enabling. And a few years back, Jamie, I took them to task, and I was giving them a lot of Agenda 21 material, talking with them and emailing and so on. And I was like the lone wolf out there. So, of course, I just got tagged as this crazy guy, but they didn't want to talk about it because they don't see a problem. They don't see it as some kind of an agenda. They just see it as the natural progression of planning. And this is the problem that we have. There's too many people that are sound asleep that are in positions that if they were awake, they would be able to help to dismantle a lot of this stuff, or at least shoot some flares up in the sky. But because they're not awake, the march continues.
Right. And as I'm doing research in Santa Rosa, again, based on Rosa Corey's work and Deborah Tavares's work, you see that they chronicled how the corruptness went in the elections for the council members, where they just completely exceeded the $500 limited donation by getting around it. This Gallagher guy and these other ones, and people screamed up in arms. But when you own the newspapers, when you own the council, when you own the government that exists here, they can do whatever they want. There's nobody stopping them. And when people try and stop them, they have no hope. They're given 3 minutes to talk at a city council meeting. Deborah, bless her heart, she goes to all the council meetings and she spends her 3 minutes time refining it to talk to the people in the audience, because she knows the board of supervisors are owned lock, stock, and barrel, you know. And did you get into ICLEI at all? Did you get into the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives?
Yes.
So, I mean, maybe we can get into that a little bit so people understand. I mean, ICLEI was created as a non-governmental spinoff of the United Nations in 1990 to implement Agenda 21 across the world locally. It is a membership organization for cities, over 7,800 worldwide as of 2012, headquartered in Bonn, Germany. It's about concentrating power in cities. It circumvents requirements for ratification of international treaties and gives the illusion of local control. ICLEI is structured as a parallel government, but has no transparency because it is a private nonprofit, NGO. In fact, the cities then ally in regional conglomerates, which breaks jurisdictional boundaries and will destroy local control. These regional boards are unelected and not answerable to any citizenry. Ultimately, this facilitates global governance by invalidating individual cities, counties, states, and nations with agreements and interwoven systems to which they are bound by contract in public-private partnerships, or PPP. That's the way they get around them.
Well, I ran into a guy that he's running for city council, and the election was last month. And just to give you an idea, and the audience mostly, because I know you know this stuff, Jamie, but he's a really good guy. He's a builder here locally, and he's a family guy. And I got to talk to him for about a half an hour outside my house. He knocked on the door. And I started asking him about Agenda 21 and sustainable development. He said to me, and really it was a rare moment of honesty, he said, you know, Mike, there are folks that go into politics with all good intentions to try to really turn the ship around. He says, what happens is when you get there, that ship is so anchored and there's so much bureaucracy, there's so much process. It is virtually impossible for somebody with new ideas to come in and to make change, because the entire apparatus that they're coming into pushes back on change. And he said it was very, very disheartening. He said, so the best he said he can do is to keep up the good fight and keep calling things out. But the problem, and he didn't say this, but I'm going to add this, but the problem that he's faced with is what I said before, Jamie. He works with people that are either completely in bed with the agenda, or people who are oblivious to the agenda and just think that you're crazy if you talk about something other than what the plans are going to be or what the strategy is going to be. He really was a breath of fresh air, but also it was very disheartening in a way, because here's a guy that really wants to make the change, and what he's saying is when you get there, it's like swimming through cement. It's impossible to make change. He was also telling me that we have a problem with the roads here. Unbelievable congestion, because what they did was they overdeveloped. And so what they do is they don't try to put the bond issues up beforehand because people will vote them down. They wait for everything to get completely screwed up as far as the amount of traffic on the road. Nobody can go anywhere. It's like a large parking lot. And then they present the bond because they know at that point people are so disgusted that they're going to vote
Right.
for the bond and push it through, right? So they play that game all the time. Why is this stuff happening? Why are we overdeveloping? What's going on here? Why is it that the planning department can't put the brakes on? And what he said to me, and I want to talk to him some more about this because we just didn't have enough time, but he said something along the lines that if the local town doesn't do it, then the county or the state will do it.
Right.
And if the county and state do it, then what happens is the town doesn't share in any revenue. So if the town wants to be able to participate in the revenue pool, then they've got to take the initiative and they've got to go do these things. But if they don't, they get Zippo. So what that tells you is that one way or another, these things are going to happen. So even if everybody in the town raised their hands, including the politicians, the probability that they would stop something long term, based upon my discussion with this gentleman, very small. I mean, these things are being pushed through, Jamie, and rammed right through. And it doesn't really matter. We don't have a voice anymore, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and you have to go. I incurred that about 10 years ago when I started to go to the democracy school with these the Council for Environmental Legal Defense Fund, and they tried to work their way up through the system. And the way our legal system works is you go from local to state to federal and now international law. So you're always getting pushed back up into them. And then most of the county funding, like you're referring to, the school funding, is federal funding.
Yeah.
So all they have to do is jerk the chain on any locals, and they can do whatever they want. And now they're going to blame PG&E for these fires, or they're saying it was a tornado fire that, occurred by just high pressure and low pressure going over the hills and creating all these winds and whatnot out of nowhere, out of weather that didn't exist. But PG&E, they get fined, and who do they turn around? What do they turn around and do? They raise the rates on everybody, right? Because they got to recoup their losses.
Yep.
But the mortgage companies don't take any hits. I mean, these people lost their homes and still owe $600,000-$700,000 on their mortgages, and their properties aren't even worth that. And the mortgage companies were gracious to give a 60-day reprieve on payments, but after those 60 days, you get a bill for all 3 months. It's going to be going on, folks. And so back to what you were talking about, the legalese of it all, the power that lies with these putting our faith in the local politicians. That's over, folks. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Stop trying. I've been meeting with people, and they all want to, they want to go and rebuild. And a lady's trying to get a bunch of local marijuana farmers who, they lost a lot. There was a lot of new marijuana farmers up in the Redwood Valleys whose one area got torched that happened to have $1 million drying in there, and some of these other local biodynamic farmers, their homes got torched, but the people next to them didn't. I mean, there was some targeted stuff that went on here, but we wrote a law back in November 2014 in Mendocino County, Measure S, where we were the first in the country to not only give nature right to exist, so nature had standing in court so we could protect our redwoods and our river, but we also passed a law that said the local community Bill of Rights has power over state and federal law, and that the Board of Supervisors is to report to each one of the community Bill of Rights communities to get their instructions before they talk to any state or federal law. And people said, well, what's going to happen when the federal government cuts off our funds? And after it passed by 68%. This was in November 2014. And I was all jacked because I had a plan. I wanted to go in and go to the pension funds. This is the key. The pension funds have hundreds of millions of dollars. In Mendocino County alone, there's $325 million in the pension funds of the local community members. And I wanted to go poll every single one of those local pensioners and say, would you like to invest locally in farms and our own infrastructure of power and whatnot? Or do you want to invest in Apple and Google and the rest of these schmucks? It would have worked, but we were so displaced because everybody gave up everything they had to get this passed that we never got back together to start the ball rolling. But it's still on the books. It's still a legal law. And we're actually talking here in Santa Rosa area about starting to start our own movement about writing our own laws. And this is about becoming the author of your own authority. And it's really big boy stuff. And what you start with, and what we're starting meeting all the victims of these fires. And the first thing we say to them is, what do you need and what do you want? Do you want to keep your homes? Do you want to not be pressured to have to agree to and sign over your life to FEMA? And they all said yes. And then we came back to them and they said, well, We couldn't do anything else. We were afraid of losing everything. So we just signed the documents. Oh shit. It's so hard for people to shift gears that quick, but there are answers, and it means taking responsibility. And the word responsibility means the ability to respond. And so by asking people what you want, instead of what will you accept, or we don't accept this, or we can't deal with this, and we're going to fight this, we starting the initiative. We're going to make our own laws. That's what the Declaration of Independence guarantees, to abolish government if it doesn't serve us anymore. But nobody has the cojones to do it. Well, I tell you, we're getting some organized people here in Santa Rosa who've lost everything. And guess what they're afraid of? Nothing.
Yeah.
They got nothing to lose. And so that's who we're really working with, is trying to get people to start waking up to say, what do you want? And by doing that, we're empowering ourselves. And it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a long-term fight. But I think that's the only way to make change, Mike.
Are people waking up, Jamie? I mean, with Harvey down in Texas and the fires in California, what are you seeing? Are people questioning more? In other words, when I say questioning, what I mean is, are they looking at it and saying, hey, this is there's something not right about these fires, and or are they just basically falling in line, accepting the official storyline, that some guy was out in the woods with a couple of matches and and lit the place up? Where are people at with this?
One guy I talked to, he was shell shocked. He goes, this reminds me of Vietnam. And he was shaking. I mean, they've lost everything. I mean, this happened overnight. You go to bed and you wake up the next morning, you've lost everything. You had time to get your wallet or something and get in your car if you're lucky. This is another thing. The body counts are not nearly what they should be. In Houston and in Northern California, it's not even close. But, people are waking up, but they don't know what they're waking up to. They don't know what happened, and all they're trying to do is get their lives back. And then when I've gone and talked to firemen, like I had Captain John Lord on, and he said this was like no other fire we've seen. And we'll get into a minute the lasers and EMP, but he was in total agreement that that's the only way that could have happened. And so I wanted to go with him to other fire departments and walk around and video him bringing this evidence to the fire departments around here now that things have settled down. And he goes, Jamie, they have no context to this stuff. They're not going to understand what we're even talking about. I've been researching this stuff for 10, 15 years. I've been watching your YouTube. I've been watching these others, and I've learned a lot. I bought some land down in Panama. A few of these firemen that I've talked to, that they have bug out procedures as well, because they saw the writing on the wall, but their fellow firemen just don't want to hear it. Yeah. So what I did is I had written a geoengineering book called Geoengineering, aka Chemtrails, this past year. I think I sent you a copy. And it included a section on directed energy weapons. And so at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds, there were hundreds of fire trucks. I mean, people came from all over the country to help with these fires that went everywhere. And so I went around while they were there and I started handing out my books. And if I had done this before the fires, people would have told me to F off these guys. But every fireman, I started with a question. I said, do you understand how these fires started? And they all shook their heads like this. And I said, do you understand how vegetation remained, but the homes were torched down to the ground? And they shook their heads. And I gave them my book and I said, here, this might help explain it and give you a little context. And everyone took it. Everyone took my books.
Very good.
And I hadn't been selling these books, and now my books are starting to sell online. I didn't do it to make money. I did it to get the information out. And now I'm going to write another one because now we have a bunch more information that, yes, this was a laser-directed EMP event. This has been working. Remember Reagan and his Star Wars back in Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, back in 1984?
Right.
That was all about getting the lasers. That was all about doing the work from a guy back in 1939, a guy named T.H. Morey in Salt Lake City, who started directing the first specialized amplifiers for extracted energy from powerful quantum mechanical fluctuations of vacuum, called direct energy. The radiant energy device weighed 55 pounds and produced 50 kilowatts of power without conventional input. Now, today, we have a pen laser you can buy at 7-Eleven, and it has a 1/4 watt of power, and you can shine it up into a pilot's eyes up thousands of feet and cause major problems from a simple store-bought pen laser. And then during the hurricanes, Michio Kaku, that guy, physicist guy, he was on the Today Show, and he was talking about how now they have 1 trillion watts of power they can use, and that there were and are going to be using them to direct weather.
I saw that clip. Yeah, he said that they were using it already.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. So if my point being is if a quarter watt or a half watt of power can shine that far up into the sky to get pilots, what do you think a trillion watts can do?
Yeah.
Right. So then I found this article back from 2008. It was in Wired magazine. Laser gunship fires, deniable strikes ahead. And Boeing announced today that the first ever test firing of a real life ray gun that could become the U.S. Special Forces way out covert strikes with, quote, plausible deniability. In tests this month, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, Boeing's Advanced Tactical Laser, a modified C-130H aircraft, quote, fired its high-energy chemical laser through its beam control system. The beam control system acquired a ground target and guided the laser beam to the target as directed by the ATL's battle management system. By firing the laser through the beam control system for the first time, the ATL team has begun to demonstrate the functionality of the entire weapon system integrated aboard the aircraft. But what Francier didn't mention was that this capability will allow special forces to strike maximum precision from long distances without being blamed for the attack's, quote, plausible deniability. An advanced tactical laser weighing 12,000 pounds and mounted on a Hercules transport, it's intended to give special forces a ultra-precision strike capability. And so what they show is that the illustration shows a theoretical 26-second engagement in which the beam deftly destroys 32 tires, 11 antennas, 11 missile launchers, 11 EO devices, 4 mortars, and 5 machine guns, while avoiding harming a truckload of refugees and the soldiers guarding them. This precision should make ATL a highly effective anti-personnel weapon, able to target or assassinate, depending on your politics, a specific individual or group in sniper-like precision. And it goes on and on. So they've had this. And then in November 9th, 2017, after the fires, Space.com has an article, U.S. Air Force jet fighters may soon be able to instantly disable enemy targets using invisible, energized beams of light shot from a small, compact laser cannon. The laser equipped with vehicles might call to mind heavily armed helicarriers from Marvel's Captain America films. Yesterday, the Air Force Research Lab signed a $26.3 million contract with Lockheed, lightweight and compact enough to be mounted on fighter jets. There's nothing new about laser weaponry, but most laser systems are powerful enough to effectively are too heavy and bulky. But most of these lasers are limited to ground and sea use. But now that's changing. So they go into how these companies that help make them are L3 Technologies, Keysight, AEG Industries, and the Sonoma Design Group. Well, they're all located in Santa Rosa, California, or they have subsidiaries here. What a coincidence, right?
Yeah. You know, I remember seeing a picture that really stuck in my head during the fires, Jamie. It was a picture of a convenience store gas station. And the convenience store itself was completely annihilated.
Right.
Dust. 30 feet away, the pumps were still there, untouched. And I remember looking at that picture and thinking to myself, how was it possible that the entire building can collapse and dustify, and the gas pumps are still intact? And the other thing that I noticed about a lot of these areas where these supposed fires took place is that the pavement around the buildings was untouched. And you would think that a fire with that much heat, that the pavement would start to buckle and melt. And in many cases, you didn't see that. So there was this very precision strike on these structures.
Right. And I saw that time and time again. This fire moved fires, because it wasn't a fire. There's over 60 fires. We got to keep that up, because they're not talking about that. They're trying to combine them all into sectional fires that happened. These things move so fast. One guy commented, he's a marathon runner, and he tried to outrun the fires, and they were moving too fast. He couldn't outrun it. That's how fast these things were moving. So it started about 9:30, 10:30 at night. It started in the east and moved west and moved north and moved south into Napa. But these fires moved so quickly, and I could see that when I started looking at where the fires came. You could literally see and imagine a laser just torching this whole section right through here. It came right through here. It came right down through here. It stopped here. And then I started learning about phased array laser systems, and they can do multiple strikes all at once. It's not rocket science to them anymore. And there's a question of whether or not you can see the lasers. They say you can't see them, but I have many accounts and many comments on my YouTube that people saw blue lights like I saw. And we have recordings of blue flashes as well. So I'm not quite sure, if it was invisible or not, but these things came out of nowhere, moved faster than any fire had ever occurred. And I want to read a couple quotes just to really bring home how radical these fires were. And this is from CAL FIRE Director Ken Pimlott. We were literally looking at explosive vegetation. These fires are burning actively during the day and night when you expect the fires to subside. Make no mistake, this is a critical, catastrophic event. We have access to every available asset in the country. These fires are literally just burning faster than firefighters can run. This is the craziest fire I've ever seen, said Grant King, chief of Guerneville Fire Department. The wind just hangs back, then fire comes in a rush with the wind, and you're dead. Ken Pimlott again. It was a very different kind of fire that happened Sunday night. The fire was almost horizontal. When it hit those homes, it was like a blowtorch. With all those fires burning, it generated so much heat that it created its own circular patterns, or I call vortex. And then a fire starting after 10 o'clock at night under 50-plus mile-an-hour winds under absolutely dry fuel beds. Every one of these fires had a fighting chance to get going long before our firefighters could even be able to get there. So they all grew into major fires very quickly. Understand these fires started after 10 p.m. around midnight on Sunday night. They burned so quickly there's no time to notify anybody. And here's another thing. FEMA turned off the evacuation orders. You know how you're supposed to get cell phones now? Everybody's got their cell phones and we're supposed to get evacuations. Well, FEMA decided not to turn on the alert system, the emergency alert system. And they said because they didn't want everybody to panic and have 500,000 people leave all at once. Well, that's crazy because Sonoma, you've been to Sonoma and Napa, it's spread out, and people are already doing that. So, there was another, cause d'etat of illegal action for FEMA. And now they're saying that, that we are to start getting the old style fire sirens, they have for tsunamis and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're talking about bringing that back. But again, these firefighters had never seen anything like this before. And then another thing we should mention is also the predictive program that goes along with this. Right after the Hurricane Harvey and Irma, what movie came out in October?
Oh, yeah, Geostorm.
Geostorm, about world storms going on. And on the same exact day, they released a movie with Jeff Bridges called Only the Brave, based on a story about a group of elite firefighters who risked everything to protect a town from a historic wildfire.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up. And then on November 10th, Washington, D.C. has the first ever Geoengineering Innovation Research and Technology Conference, starting to talk about geoengineering. It's crazy.
I want to ask you a question. Did you see or listen to the interview that Judy Wood did with Andrew Johnson? Andrew spends a lot of time with Richard Hall on Rich Planet TV. Judy was addressing these fires in California, and she was basically just poo-pooing the whole idea that these fires were being generated by directed energy weapons. And it seemed like a very, very odd interview. It almost seemed to me like somebody had put her out there and said, look, you just need to douse the flame on this thing and just ridicule the whole idea of directed energy weapons. Did you listen to that interview?
Yeah, I listened to the first part, which is basically she dismissed us out of hand. She just dismissed anything to do with the type of work she had done in her physics and all her doctorate degrees and everything she showed. But I just did a video and I showed these fires in Canada and China and Portugal and Chile and Northern California with the cars. And she went in all into the cars and the exact same stuff. I think she was threatened. I think either she was mind controlled or she was threatened because you haven't heard boo from her since, right? And I don't know. I read her book. I thought it was plausible that it was a directed energy weapon. I located in Manhattan a source out of where it could have come from and how there was a geoengineering event off the coast on 9/11 right before it as well. And I lost a lot of respect for that woman right after that because she didn't even give a chance. I mean, she's all, you got to look at the evidence. You got to take your time and all this. Well, where is she now? I mean, I'm putting out stuff. I put out maybe 8 or 10 video docs now on all the causes and all the different reporting of what's happened in the temperatures. I mean, it takes over 2,500 degrees to melt glass. I didn't find any glass in these cars. It takes that much to melt iron. There were no tubs, yet there was plastic. I went to one house and there's homes completely gutted except for the fireplace. And 20 feet away, there's a basketball court with the netting still on, the glass still there. It's unexplainable unless there was torched. The only thing it could be was directed from above.
Engine blocks too, right? I mean, weren't engine blocks melted? Yeah. How does that happen? You got to figure how hot does a car run, right? It's extremely hot. I was watching a video, maybe it was a video that you had put up where they talked about these engine blocks basically had melted.
Yeah, we saw that too. We were driving around the areas and there was a Jeep-like truck and the hood was completely gone. And I'm looking at the engine and I can't see the engine. I get up to it and I look down and there on the ground is the melted steel, aluminum, whatever it is on the ground there. But also besides that, Mike, I posted over 15 cars that were flipped over on their roofs. What can cause that to happen? What does a car weigh? 3,000 pounds maybe on average?
Yeah.
What would it take to flip that on a roof? All you can explain is waves of energy, electromagnetic pulses. Boom, a huge pulse flips it up in the air and flips it on its roof. I mean, these things were torched and flipped on their roof. So there had to be this massive amount of energy. And they're coming up with all these excuses like the Diablo winds and tornado fires that lifted cars before. I mean, all the firemen I went to them, I said this, they go, no way. No way. This after this after this. But again, we're months into it and there's still no official explanation. They haven't even bothered to try. So it's a scam. They've been planning this and it's just going to keep going on. But like we're getting back to earlier, there was a hell of a lot of people that just woke up in Northern California and we're not being silent. Another thing that happened here, which I want to report on, was on October 19th, we did a benefit. It was my birthday and we did a benefit to raise money for the victims. It was originally going to be a benefit for Harvey and we retooled it to the benefit for the victims of the Sonoma County area. And I'm driving home and I get a desperate phone call from somebody that's inside one of the shelters at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. And they were telling me that the police had showed up and the Red Cross was going out, the Red Cross director, and pointing to people. And the police were removing people from the shelters and putting them out to the streets in the pouring rain.
I think I saw that. And that was on your channel. Was this because they were looking for people who had criminal records or something to that effect?
They started with that. Yeah, they started with that. They went in, people had probation and whatnot. But then they went to this I have on video. I had a first person account. I took two people to my house, and this one gentleman reported on it and he got videos of it. And I also spoke to a volunteer who was appalled by it, and said that the Red Cross director was telling the police and just pointing out randomly. And people were like, no, don't send me out in the rain. And people that did not have documentation were the first to go, right? The undocumented workers were not allowed in FEMA shelters. They were not allowed in the fairgrounds. And then the next were to go were people were not allowed to get their meds if they weren't people that had lost their homes, because a lot of homeless, what I call displaced, they went into the shelters as well. And so they were trying to get the Sonoma County Fairgrounds, as this guy was telling me, back into business. They said in 3 days we need to be back into business. So the people that could go back to their homes went, and the people that couldn't and the homeless were being evicted. And they were being evicted in the middle of the night so nobody could see it in the rain. The same exact thing happened in Houston as well. So it couldn't have been just an event. And then they also told a story, this volunteer who I talked to on the phone told down the road at the Petaluma Fairgrounds that the local people told the Red Cross they were not in charge. The people were in charge and they protected the people there. Where up in Sonoma and Santa Rosa, they weren't able to do that. So the people rose up down there to protect their own. But this is part of the whole Red Cross disaster capitalism. And a Red Cross was on the Knights of Columbus and the ships and the Knights of Malta. And the Red Cross is part of the whole Rothschilds Red Shield group. They're all part of the same group, and they're just making bank. They take in all this money, and all you could see, the donations from Red Cross in all of Houston, was water bottles. There were water bottles everywhere in Santa Rosa as well. It's kind of like their calling card, so they could say they did something. And people don't want to believe this, but I went and saw it for myself, folks. I'm a first-person account. Nobody's seen Red Cross. Please do not donate to these criminals. You're just enriching them and giving them more power to keep doing it.
these organizations that are supposedly set up to supposedly help people, and when the time comes when people need help, they're nowhere to be found. It's very disheartening, Jamie. I'm glad we're talking about this because, like you said, there was no coverage of this. I mean, they cover the like with the hurricanes approach. Once the hurricane hit, that was it. Channel gets turned, the topic, that's being presented on the television and in the media changes, and we don't hear squat about the people who are suffering. They'll spend time talking about Matt Lauer being fired, but they won't talk about the type of thing that you're talking to us about here. So I'm really glad that you came on to talk about this, and hats off to you for going down to Texas and also for doing the work that you did in California. I was watching your videos where you were driving around, I guess, with your camcorder, and you were showing how these homes were completely decimated. Justified, folks. There was something very, very much wrong with how this thing went down.
Yeah, and another thing to add to the uniqueness of it was the winds. And the winds to a person said, I mean, there was winds 30 miles away. People were smelling smoke 50 miles away in the middle of the night. The fires just started and they were smelling smoke out in the coast. And these winds, they said, got up to 80 miles an hour. But we went back and we looked at the wind charts, and the winds were 25 to 30 miles an hour at its peak. And they created they said, oh, these vortexes were created of wind energy that were created from the displacement between higher and low pressures, blah, blah, blah. No, they weren't. There was no storms forecast. The weather was calm. Out of nowhere, this stuff came. And then by 6 a.m. the next morning, the winds were back to zero. Back to zero. So it was an event. It was an event that came in the middle of the night, just like it came in Hurricane Harvey. And everybody nobody could respond. They had no time to respond. And there was nothing to indicate that, in a fire season, what do you have? You see a fire start, it builds, a firestorm creates, the heat builds over time, it gets fuel from the wood and whatnot, and it gets more intense heat. We had a Kmart where the fire went from 20 miles away, and within an hour and a half, it crossed an 8-lane freeway on 101 and torched a Kmart, 100,000 square foot Kmart, which was right by the gas station I think you were talking about, and gutted the entire inside, yet left the cement walls up and all the fir trees around it, or eucalyptus trees. I mean, you breathe on a eucalyptus tree, it catches fire,
Yeah.
And here's an entire Kmart completely gutted, but next door to it, the building's fine, and the Arby's next to it and the Trader Joe's are completely torched. And, you have to see it, and now we're getting this disaster tourism. They're having to, they wouldn't let people back in their homes for quite a while. It was a military operation. We had the military's police were everywhere. All of a sudden, there was Afghanistan MRAPs just driving all over the place, and crazy.
Now, let me ask you, Jamie, go back to Hurricane Harvey for a second. I meant to ask you this early on. You had mentioned that when it hit, that there was little to no wind?
Correct.
Okay, so the folks that were there, they told you that no wind, just a ton of water fell from the sky.
To a person, they said, one, that it was reduced from a Category 4 to a tropical, so they didn't leave. Two, it wasn't the hurricane, quote unquote, that caused it. It was the dams being released. And three, that it was like nothing they'd ever seen. There was no wind. It came out of nowhere. And they almost all of them used the same words. It was biblical. It was like the heavens just opened up. My wind chimes didn't even blow.
Okay, that's wild. That's really unbelievable.
And we see the same thing with the torch fires, as I'm calling them, the smart fires, right? There's a new term, smart fires. The most selective fires in history. And we see the same thing. The winds, they say that was the winds. Well, what now? And this you get into some of the EMP and the laser research and stuff. And I did an interview just recently. I'm starting to do interviews myself. And the first one I did was with Alana Freeland. You know her that wrote the book?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had Alana on. Yeah.
Oh, good. Wonderful lady. Very, very intelligent and whatnot. And she was describing how the vortex works, how they use the geoengineering to create this false ionized sky. In fact, she's writing a new book about it, how we're seeing that the geoengineering, the chemtrails now coming down to 8,000 and 10,000 feet. And she's saying they're creating this ionized sky because they want to weaponize the world, and they want to be able to weaponize it at any time, any place, and anywhere. And that's why, I don't know if you're seeing it, but we're seeing increases in chemtrail spraying. I've been watching chemtrails since 2005. I've never seen as much spraying going on as there is now. And so she was describing how they use this ionized sky and start alternating the frequencies and using this pulsing action. And then once they do that, they can start stirring it from above and creating this kind of like whirlpool or tornado effect. And then from there, they can direct these lasers with extreme precision down to a millimeter or more of directed energy. And it's so powerful. And they are able, like we chronicled earlier, they can do this now from jets or from space platforms. Any way they can do that. And so, the document Owning the Weather 2025, you're familiar with that one about the U.S. Air Force document out? Well, they've done it and they have it. And so it's up to us to all wake up to this new paradigm, this new weather war terrorism, geostorms that they can create anywhere, and not be afraid, but get active and start saying what it is you want. And if you don't want this to happen, start creating your own laws, start writing your own rules. The only ones that make the rules these days are our rulers. And we got to get off that train. They've had the game for so long that it's now time for us to start making our own. And maybe people aren't wanting to do that, but that's the only option I can see.
Yeah, most people are complacent and apathetic. Most people have embraced authority, Jamie. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, and I don't like to make that type of commentary, but it's reality. Whenever you talk about being your own authority, they look at you cockeyed.
Right.
It's really strange. We have a tough row to hoe in order to get people to change their minds and to change their thinking and to think in terms of being sovereign and in thinking in terms of creating their own laws. There's a long way to go. But look, you and I have talked about this before. You have to keep doing it. As tough as it is, and sometimes as dark as it gets, and I would say that Hurricane Harvey and the fires out in California got pretty dark as far as implementing their agenda and really not caring what or who was in their way. They were going to do it come hell or high water. So the other question I wanted to ask you, though, before we head out here is, you mentioned these blue flashes, and I saw other videos that weren't on your channel that talked about the same thing. So it wasn't like lightning. Can you describe why it was different than lightning, what it is that you experienced?
It was just a couple flashes of blue. And, since I've been looking up and looking at the skies since 2005, I kind of took it to be some type of new kind of, I just thought it was just a new kind of chemtrail, because we had, back in August, we had, as I said earlier, we had the hottest temperatures. We got up to 118 degrees in Santa Rosa and blew the doors off the hottest temperatures. Another note is I have an apple farm over 140 trees, and I got one box of apples. One box. All my fruit's gone. All the trees. I mean, it's another weapon I think is occurring with these temperatures and stuff. But the blue flashes, I don't know if they were part of it, but I know they have the capability. A lot of people are commenting, no, it has to be invisible. But so many people said they saw the same thing that it couldn't be discounted as just random, because so many people from so many different areas said the same thing. And a couple of people that I posted on my video said they had cameras, or said they took pictures of it, and I posted those. And other people said, oh, that's the flash from a camera. But so many people are reporting it that it has to be valid, because it was eyewitnesses and first-person accounts. And I find it very, very humbling. And like you said, is very disconcerting when you're using first-person accounts. I saw this, and people are looking at you, go, you're wrong. You didn't see it.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. And the other sad part of it, I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but unfortunately, the not in my backyard syndrome, it's happening here as well. And since these torch fires hit one neighborhood, Coffee Park, Fountain Grove, but didn't hit next door, the people that didn't get hit next door are just going back to their daily lives like nothing happened.
Yep.
And it's sad. It's like, gosh, man, what does it take? And the people in Houston, I saw the same thing. The areas that were hit, people are out, they're gone, they're refugees. I mean, this is a new term. It's called climate refugees, and it's happening in the United States. And there's thousands and thousands of them. And this is part of part of the Agenda 21 and stack them and pack them and getting everybody in the cities is to create this refugee status and then start providing these 250 square foot homes. And interestingly, they passed the stack them and pack them laws on the same day in New York City and in San Francisco. And Bloomberg has this program that he initiated called Plan 2030, and they were planning on having 1 million more people in New York City. 1 million more people. So they're stating this is their agenda. They're making these small, tiny places, and it's becoming this elite. They decide that they want the lands for themselves. There's too many people in the world, the Georgia Guidestones, and we're seeing it in action. But, some people are waking up and more and more, and I'm more hopeful, but I'm less hopeful that we can stop them right now. But what I was just talking with my friend last night about, because she was starting to get pretty upset. She started with the geoengineering movement with Dane Wigington, and then just got disappointed that she thought we could make change. As I said, we're making change, but we're at the front breaking the wind. We're the pioneers, the first responders, the visionaries that are being the first, and many are going to follow us. And like Alana Freeland said, she's writing her books for 50 years in the future. And this is where we have to get to, Mike, and this is how I kind of want to end this on, is our role is to sacrifice our lives for the betterment of the future of all. There's so much sentient life that's being destroyed. If you don't wake up right now, if you're not being conscious and taking action, if you're not feeling it in the bottom of your gut, this pit, that I know you feel the same thing that won't go away because things are just so wrong. And they're using this run to numb stuff with Matt Lauer and all the pedophile stuff where these presidents and everybody else are all a bunch of pedophile guys themselves, the Vatican, the British House. It's all to cover up what they're doing and just to numb us all from news. Don't get numb. Keep looking. Recharge your batteries if you have to. Step back from it. But this is the greatest fight in 500 years. And if you're not stepping up to the plate, you might as well be a can of spinach. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right, Jamie. I tell people all the time, the work that we're doing is table setting, and then the baton's going to get passed. I mean, you and I are probably around the same age. So, I'm doing this, for my daughter. I'm doing it for my daughter's kids, and, right down the line. And you're right. I mean, they are just, man, what they're doing to this world and what they're doing to all life is just incredible to me. I mean, it's unfathomable. More and more people really, really do have to start feeling it. They really do. They have to get into the game. I just don't know how it is that people cannot see the stuff that's out there. I'm not saying they have to see everything, but there's more than enough that's out there where you can see a little bit, and you should have your interest piqued, And unfortunately, there's a lot of people walking around just staring at their phone and oblivious. But you're right. I mean, we're doing this. It's table setting. It's to set the stage for the future. And, and we've got to keep going.
But isn't that what our parents did and their parents did before the industrial devolution, which is enslaving us all? Now everybody with their smartphones and their, tapping this and tapping that and heads down in their hoodies. Before that, my parents were middle class and they worked their asses off to have a better life for me. Before that, their grandparents did the same thing, and every generation of families did that before. So in my thinking, we're just getting back to our roots of sacrificing for the greater good. And it's a very much a spiritual battle. We are in a spiritual war. This isn't a material war. This isn't about what you possess and what you have being taken away from you. These are such demonic forces, satanic, Luciferian, Armonic forces, folks, that it becomes a spiritual war of the greatest kind that has been predicted from the Bible to so many different ways. And they're telling you what they're going to do. Like, Plan 2030 for New York and Bloomberg. They're telling you what they're going to do. They just do it in such slow increments, speeding up now, that it's hard for people to see back then connecting dots. But now, if you can't see it, you're not even looking. You're not even trying.
Right. That's exactly right. Now, Jamie, you have a website, blogs, and you have your YouTube channels. Can you just tell the audience where they can find more about you and about your work?
Sure, Mike. The two YouTubes are Plain Truth, one spelled APLANE and another APLAIN. I've got a website that's general information called Taboo, TABU blog, stands for Towards a Better Understanding blog.com. I have a vaccine information site. I Apple Victor Victor Ida.info, avvi.info. It's on vaccine information. And then I have the Flat Earth website of plaintruth.info, which I must thank you, Mike, because I'm stealing all your work. I just haven't been focused on the Flat Earth stuff, and you're staying true to it. And I'm taking a lot of your work and posting it on my channel. So thanks for keeping me alive that way.
Oh, anytime.
You do great work, Mike. And you're one of my heroes and one of the people I look up to, along with the Deborah Tavareses and Lana Freelands. And one thing I'm noticing in my demographics is a lot more women are waking up. A lot more women are starting to be the mother bear, and they're starting to wonder about their cubs. And I wondered why it took so long. Where my channels were pretty much 80 to 90% men to women. Now I've got like 70 to 30. There's been a significant shift. And I think that's part of the reason is because of Alana's and Deborah Tavares and Rosa Corey's work, that they've been pioneering. And I think women are starting to feel their intuition side in the pit of their gut too, that they better start to get busy.
Yeah, I could tell you that my daughter is she's in her early 30s, and she's completely and totally awake. So when you're talking about the women waking up, Jamie, I completely agree. I think there's that motherly, maternal, feminine aspect of them where they want to nurture more and more. I know my daughter's very plugged in. I'm very proud of her. She has conversations with me where she says that she doesn't see how other people don't see what it is that she sees. And I just have to tell her, just take your time, different rate and pace in which people do wake up.
Well, and Martin Luther King, there comes a time when silence is betrayal.
Right.
And no one in this world cannot say things are a mess. There's not one person unless you've got a Bitcoin account or something like that, right? And so, this debt society is going to implode. The U.S. economy is being geared to turn over to China. The BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are going to become the new consumer debts is their plan. And the United States is being retooled to be manufacturers like Chinese are now. That's why the first Foxconn is going to open in Wisconsin. Foxconn is the largest 1.3 million employees that make all our smartphones and computers, and they have to put up suicide nets. And that's why they raised the unemployment rate they hadn't raised in 15 years to $15, because everybody's going to make $15, and all they're going to be able to afford is the stack 'em and pack 'ems. You can see it. The movie is right in front of us, but it's a Shakespearean tragedy, but it's our tragedy. And so owning it becomes the work, and then finding your happy place, finding your own way of being okay with it all. That's really hard, but I found a way that, like you said, I'm dedicating it to the future of all life. That's my work. It's not about me. It's just like it's not about you. And you're raising your daughter and I'm raising my son to be aware. And I'm fearful for their future, but I'm hopeful that things are going to change because we are waking up.
Yeah. Well, what I tell my daughter is don't be scared about this stuff because when you're smart about it, then it gives you the ability to avoid many of the traps.
Yeah.
And you're actually a lot better off knowing than you are unknowing.
And it's also getting busy, doing something. If you're just talking about it, you're going to sit with it. It's going to internalize and it's going to drive you nuts and you're going to become unempowered. Doing something provides hope. Take the S off of scare and you got care. We need to care about others and we need to care about Mother Earth. Mother Earth is being destroyed as well. I mean, the whales out here, these guys out here in Maui, Hawaii are talking about there's no whales anymore. Their businesses are being shut down. And I'm seeing forests here decimated as well. And the heat is just intense. So it's going on everywhere.
The Amazon too.
The Amazon too. I mean, we're cutting down trees, which are the lungs of life. So get busy somewhere. There's enough to get started. Find some common people. As the Hopi prophecies have said, it's time. It's the 12th hour. It's time to get into the river. Many are going to be left on shore, but the river has its destination. The river has its destination. Find those in the river and join up. And a river has calmness and it has waterfalls. And we're going to be going over the waterfalls, folks. There's no doubt about it. But we're going to be okay if we stay in the river and find others in like-minded people. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
I'm packing my bags, and I'm out of here. Riches to rags, can't live in fear. This place is surreal. Nobody cares. It has no feel, just blank stares. I'm tired of all the hate. I'm tired of all the dysfunction. I'm tired of being tired. I'm leaving dystopia. I'm not a slave, so please go away. I won't behave. I don't care what you say. I don't sleepwalk or crawl on my knees. And I don't sheep talk, so you can be pleased. I'm tired of all the hate. I'm tired of all the dysfunction. I'm tired of being tired. I'm leaving dystopia. I'm packing my bags, and I'm out of here. Riches to rags, can't live in fear. This place is surreal. Nobody cares. It has